Before the Red Sea ever parted, before the tablets were carved and the mountain burned with glory, there was a child crying among the reeds of the Nile. The Pharaoh had decreed that every Hebrew son should die, but his mother, desperate, trembling, chose faith over fear. She wove a basket of reeds, sealed it with tar, and set it upon the water. Sometimes, deliverance begins with a mother's tears and a small act of courage. The river carried that child not to safety, but to the very palace of his enemy. Pharaoh's daughter found him there, floating among the reeds, and named him Moses, drawn out of the water. In one moment, the God of heaven turned an edict of death into the beginning of deliverance. Moses grew up among marble halls and golden crowns. He was taught the ways of kings, the language of power, the customs of the empire. But within him burned another truth, quieter, older. The blood of slaves ran through his veins. He watched his people toil beneath the lash, their cries rising like smoke. And though he wore the garments of a prince, his heart beat with the ache of a shepherd. One day, that ache turned to anger. He saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew slave, and in his fury, Moses struck back. The man fell dead in the sand. With that act, the prince became an exile. He fled into the wilderness, running not only from Pharaoh's wrath, but from the shame of his own failure. For 40 years, Moses wandered the silence of Midian. He traded a scepter for a shepherd's staff. He tended sheep instead of armies. And perhaps he believed his story had ended there, forgotten by the world, and maybe even by God. But God does not forget. One day, while leading his flock beyond the desert, Moses saw a bush aflame, burning, yet unconsumed. And from the fire came a voice, "Moses, Moses." He turned aside. "Here I am." "Take off your sandals," the voice said, "for the place where you stand is holy ground." The ground was still the same earth, the same dust, but in that moment, it became sacred. Because God's presence turns ordinary soil into holy soil. Moses trembled. The voice spoke again. "I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. I have come down to deliver them, and I will send you to Pharaoh." Moses faltered. "Who am I that I should go?" He was older now, his confidence buried beneath years of regret. He had no eloquence, no army, no power left. But God's answer was simple: "I will be with you." Sometimes, that's all faith has to hold on to. Not a plan, not proof, just presence. So Moses returned to Egypt, the land of his fear and his failure. He stood before Pharaoh, the man who once could have called him brother, and spoke the words that would shake an empire. "Let my people go." Pharaoh laughed. Empires often do when faced with faith. But heaven was listening. And one by one, the plagues fell upon the land. Blood, frogs, darkness, death. Each one a message, each one a warning. But Pharaoh's heart remained hard, until the night the firstborn sons of Egypt cried out in sorrow. Then, at last, the people were free. But freedom, as Moses would learn, is not the end of the road. It is only the beginning. They left Egypt in haste, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Yet when they reached the sea, the sound of pursuit thundered behind them. Pharaoh had changed his mind. The people cried out, "Why did you bring us here to die? Were there no graves in Egypt?" Fear speaks quickly when faith grows tired. Moses looked upon the water before him and the army behind. No escape, no logic, no way. And then came the whisper of that same voice from the desert. "Lift your staff." He raised his hand and the sea began to move. The waters trembled, then rose like walls of glass, glistening in the moonlight. A path appeared where none had been, and Moses walked forward, step by step, between the walls of miracle. Behind him came a nation, weary yet believing. The sea floor turned to dry ground beneath their feet. And when the last child crossed, Moses turned once more, and the waters fell, swallowing the chariots of Pharaoh. In that moment, Egypt's power broke, but the wilderness had only just begun. The people sang songs of freedom, but faith fades faster than songs last. Days turned to months. They hungered, they thirsted, they doubted, and every time they faced hardship, They looked at Moses and said, "It was better in Egypt." Leadership is a lonely road. To carry the faith of others while your own grows thin is a burden few understand. Yet Moses continued. He struck the rock for water. He lifted his hands for battle. He climbed the mountain to meet with God. There, amidst thunder and fire, the commandments were written, not just laws, but promises. Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor. Honor life. Honor truth. It was a covenant for a people who had never known freedom. But when Moses descended, tablets in hand, he found chaos below. The people had built a golden calf, worshipping what they could see, rather than trusting what they could not. Moses shattered the tablets in grief. But God's mercy was greater than their failure. Moses climbed the mountain again, to carve anew what sin had broken. Because grace does not erase the past, it rewrites it. Year after year, the desert shaped them, and the man who once fled from Pharaoh became the man who stood face to face with God. His hair turned white beneath the sun. His eyes dimmed, but his faith deepened. He led them through rebellion, hunger, doubt, and loss. But always, the pillar still guided, and the promise still stood. And then, one morning, God told him, "Go up to the mountain. Look out upon the land I promised." He climbed slowly, the years heavy upon him. He looked across the valley and saw the green hills of Canaan, shining in the distance. He smiled not in regret, but in peace. Moses would not step into that land. His journey was complete where another's began. For sometimes, the ones who start the work never see it finished. Their reward is not the destination, but the faith to walk the road. And when his time came, Moses lay down among the rocks of the mountain, and the scripture says that God himself buried him. No monument, no crown, no tomb, only a legacy written on the hearts of those he led. From the Nile to the Red Sea, from Pharaoh's halls to the mountain of fire, his life was proof that weakness is no obstacle to calling. Only unwillingness is. He began afraid and ended faithful. He spoke of freedom, yet walked mostly in wilderness. But in that wilderness, he learned what freedom truly meant. Because faith is not a moment of triumph, it is a lifetime of trust. And the path to promise is always long. But every step, every scar, every prayer whispered into silence brings you closer to the one who called you in the first place. So when your road grows long, when belief feels heavier than hope, remember Moses. Remember that miracles often come after exhaustion and answers after silence. Remember that God doesn't ask for perfection, only perseverance. For faith, real faith, is not the power to part seas. It is the courage to step forward before they do. If this story moved you, remember, faith doesn't fail when the path grows hard. It deepens there. Subscribe to Ancient Voices for more timeless stories of courage and belief. And ask yourself, how long would you keep believing when the path stays hard?